joining me. Hopefully you can all see me. I'm just waiting for everyone to jump in. I can see numbers going up, which is nice because it is 7 p.m. and we thought we'd try and do something a little bit later in the evening. So hopefully you've been able to get home from school if you're in school, or finish up the school or work day and maybe have a bit of dinner. I just shoveled in some cauliflower soup with some chickens. That was nice. Gave my cat some cuddles and put him out of the room so he doesn't disturb us, hopefully, and we'll get started really soon. So I can see the numbers climbing up, which is awesome. It means people are jumping on in. Could you just let me know a couple of things? First of all, make sure you have the chat box open, and down the bottom you'll see a little thing there, a drop down panel where you can select to send it to all panelists or attendees. Can you just write something in there and say g'day, or let me know that you can hear me so I know I'm not talking to myself? That would be really great. Let's wait for a few things to come in. Yeah, hi, great. You can all hear me. Awesome. Fabulous. Now the second thing, are you able to see the slide here which has improving teacher wellbeing? Yeah, you can see it. Good. I've been doing some recording and I couldn't remember if I changed the settings on PowerPoint, and then I was frantically trying to Google what it should be like for when I do this, and I couldn't find the answer, and I was like, well, I'll just have to hope I haven't changed it and haven't forgotten. So that's great. Fantastic. Oh yeah, cauliflower soup, so good, Melissa, you're totally right. I got this is not related to, well, it's kind of, I suppose it's a bit wellbeing, but I got a thermo blend of Kogan on the weekend, so I was trying out some new recipes and getting a bit creative and a bit interesting with some new recipes, so that was a bit of fun. So that's where the cauliflower soups come in this week. But I mean, I just love that it's cauliflower, broccoli and pumpkin season, because they're my absolute favourite vegetables, so I'm pretty happy with going to the supermarket and getting my veggies for the week at the moment. I don't know, I'm just filling time, sorry. All right, so I think everyone's jumped on in. Now you know what I have for dinner. I'm sure you're all happy you joined in on that. We're going to get started. So thank you so much for giving up your time this evening and being here live. I know people would have registered and you'll get the recording. So if you are giving up your time to watch the recording, I really appreciate that as well. But there's something that really, I think, well, of course, makes it more meaningful when you do show up live, because you get to be part of the real conversation that we're having today. And I'm going to talk to you about a few things, and then at the end we can have a bit of a conversation. And of course, there's always opportunity for you to drop something in the chat box and let me know if anything pops up for you, or you have any questions or anything like that. But let's get started, I think. So we're all here today to talk about wellbeing, especially in the teacher space, right? So teacher wellbeing. And I don't know how you're all feeling at the moment, but from teacher colleagues that I have spoken to, and just things that I've noticed in terms of what's happening in some social media groups that I'm a part of, and articles and blogs that are out there, it's a really hot topic and it is not going away. And, you know, we can say that, yeah, I was going to say that COVID has heightened our sense of wellbeing as teachers, and has, I guess, brought it to perhaps more attention of the media and people that are involved in those places where they're more influential. But it's not a new issue for teachers. I think as schools and teaching has changed, and, you know, the curriculum has become busier, and we're now teaching all kinds of things that don't even appear in the curriculum, and having to address things like bullying and even swimming lessons, or how to have conversations when you're feeling like you're in conflict, and teaching students all kinds of things that don't appear in the curriculum as well. It's becoming more amplified, and COVID-19 certainly has added to that, especially for those, I know many of you are probably joining in from Victoria and you are having to teach remotely, which, gosh, that essence of connection is so imperative to our well-being on so many levels. And I think with COVID, that has been taken away from us. And I'll use the word forced, because it's been forced away from us. It hasn't been a conscious decision. And so it's different when you choose to disconnect, because you know that you need that time to kind of reconnect with yourself. So you might disconnect from others or other things, but when that's imposed upon you, it's really hard. So yeah, it's a really difficult time. Yeah, it's really hard to be isolated when your job is all about people, isn't it? It's all about face-to-face teaching and connecting with colleagues and having planning meetings and staff meetings, and even just the staff room is such an important part to our overall well-being. So yeah, Fiona, I think you're right. Exhausted is totally the word that I think lots of teachers would be using right now. Yeah, it's interesting. I'll talk about that. So, you know, teaching is a career that is all about giving, and we just give and give and give and give so much because that's what we do. That's what it is. But we so forget to give to ourselves. And so I'm going to talk about that through the lens of self-care, and I'm going to unpack a little bit more deeply what well-being is. So let's just get straight into that. So speaking of connection, there we go. This webinar will be more impactful for you if you do connect and join in the conversation here. So I'm going to try and do two things whilst we're here together tonight. I'm going to try and go through some content that I have prepared for you and talk through that, but I'm also going to engage you through the comment box that you put in. So if at any point you want to add to the conversation that I'm having, or if you want to bring something up, please do that. And please know that at times you might just see me look down and have a quick read and then come back, and that's just part of knowing that we are all in this conversation together. I mean, it would have been so much better if I could have hired a venue and got you all together and we could have spent a day together talking about this, but it isn't possible right at this moment in time. Maybe next time it will be, and that would be lovely, but I want you to know you're as much as a part of this conversation as I am. So please jump in, and also if anything pops up and you don't feel comfortable sharing it in this space, you can email me directly at amy@realschools.com.au. And the reason I say that is because sometimes wellbeing can be a really sensitive issue, and as we move through working on ourselves and how we look after ourselves, and even working through some complexities around wellbeing, some things can come up that maybe make you feel a bit emotional, or you're not sure where to share that. And I always encourage you to know that if you need a safe space, I can totally be that. So please know that if you are feeling like that and you want to share and connect, but you don't want to do it in public forum, absolutely flick me an email. Okay, so let's keep going. Now, I've got a bit of a funny story to start, because I think we hear these words, well-being, and we hear self-care, and you know, there's a few things that are really common, and I'll talk about that in a little while when it comes to what both of these elements are. But I don't know about you, but there's certainly been an increase of articles and blogs that I've noticed around wellbeing. People are writing about them, talking about them. It's, you know, it's in media, and it's in newspaper articles, and it's popping up on social media, and there's stuff there. So I try and keep a good eye on different things that are out there. And I have done quite a bit of research, and I published a white paper earlier this year, which I'll at the end show you how you can have access to. And I just like to know what else is being said, because I think as someone who is leading this space, I've got to really know what else is happening. You know, it's like when you teach literacy, you've got to know what else is happening in other literacy classrooms and other programs and other approaches, so that you can really make a well-rounded decision based on what is best for you, and what you believe in, and what underpins your, I guess, your stance in this space. And so I'm just going to straight up say that most of what we are reading and seeing, and that is being put in front of us around wellbeing, is kind of wrong. And I'm just going to call it. I'm just going to say that most of the advice that we see around wellbeing is not wellbeing. A lot of it is self-care, and I'll give credit to that. And self-care totally plays its part, and it is really important, and it's a perfect place to start. And it's kind of easy sometimes, but it is not wellbeing. Now, lots of the advice that we read and we engage with is not providing that knowledge and wisdom so that you can be in terms of well-being. And that's where I'm going to lead you towards the end of this conversation. But I read an article earlier this week, a blog, it was sent to my inbox from someone a company, an organization that I won't name. And they were talking about quick things that you can do right now to improve your well-being. And I was like, oh, this will be interesting. I'll have a bit of a look. And it was done really well, and it certainly highlighted that wellbeing is an issue and something we need to address. But I have to be honest and say that when I read the advice that was given out, part of me cringed at that, because some of it was just downright insulting. Two of those dot points in there were about make sure your staff so it's talking to leaders, and make sure your staff know that they have access to EAP. We know that. We know our EAP exists, but 6 free sessions with the EAP is not going to solve wellbeing issues and the wellbeing crisis we are seeing right now. It might help you for a little while, but 6 sessions in your however many years of your teaching career is not going to solve this issue. The other point in there, sorry, I was just checking to make sure we're recording. Would have been bad if we're not. Go back. So there was that. Make sure you know your EAP exists. I mean, you know that, right? The other comment in there, or piece of advice that was given, was encourage staff and yourself to access different services like Beyond Blue. Now, they do a great job and absolutely go there, but I think in terms of our teacher wellbeing as a whole and having that collective responsibility, we need to start coming together. And I think the advice that we need to be looking towards and for is about how do we work one on ourselves, but then collectively together. And that is really why I think our approaches to wellbeing need to shift. But to be honest, the piece that really stood out to me when I read this article, that kind of, I don't want to underplay my emotions, because when I read it, I was really like, you have to be kidding. The thing that really got under my skin was ergonomics. Ergonomics is going to fix your well-being. So there was a dot point in there around how if your well-being isn't taken care of, perhaps look at the ergonomics of your desk and your chair height and make sure everything's in order. And I thought to myself, let's just play that conversation out, shall we? So we've got a teacher at the moment, this is hypothetical, who, you know, let's say they're in Victoria and they're teaching remotely, and they say to their school leader, you know what, my well-being is not great. I feel disconnected from my school and my students. You know, I live by myself, so I don't really see people, and I'm feeling like really off, and I don't know if my teaching is good enough, and some kids aren't turning up and I'm worried about them, and there's a lot on my mind and I just don't feel good, and I'm wondering if you can help me. And their advice is, have you checked the height of your chair? Like, I think if you just adjust where you're sitting, your well-being will be taken care of. I just don't think that is well-being at all. And I don't think that is going to fix any well-being issues. I mean, if your chair is not the right height, you can fix it. I don't think you need someone to tell you to do that. I don't think you need someone to tell you that you need to put a plant in your office to make you feel better. And I think as a whole, we can do better than that. What do you think? Is that story like connecting with any of you or resonating? I want to take a sip of tea. I need to know, is anyone there? No one's talking? 100% about 5 exclamation marks, yes. Agree. Made you laugh? Yeah, good. I've calmed down in the last 48 hours, but when I was talking to some other people about it, my partner's a teacher as well, so sometimes I vent to him a little bit. I was like, you are not going to at all believe what I've read. So, yeah. You plan on your desk died. Can you see what I've got behind me? They're actually dried native flowers. So technically they're already dead, but they'll also never die, but they'll just stay there forever. Yeah, and I kill plants all the time. Terrible. Or my cat eats them. I have another plant up here. It's purely so the cat can eat it. Awareness of well-being without tools. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. All right, let's get on. So we're going to cover 3 things here. It would be funny if it was not serious. Yeah, but I feel like sometimes we are just going to have to laugh at some of this to know that we can let it go and look for something better. So here are 3 things that we're going to cover as we move on a little bit. It's already 7:15. I talk a lot. I'll try not to. Teacher wellbeing is everyone's responsibility. So that's number 1. Number 2, the second big takeaway, we need to move from a reactive response to an embedded approach. And self-care is not well-being, but it's an important part of it. Slides are not changing. Okay, let me just see. When I said, oh no, I don't think just give me 1 second. I'm just going to stop share. And you should just be able to see my big head on the screen now. And I'm going to go into PowerPoint. I must have not changed those settings, but that's okay. Because you need to be able to see the slides. Let's try again. So I'm going to share my screen again. So Oh no. I nearly ended the meeting instead of sharing. Can you see a green slide in front of you? How's that? Yeah, you've got the green one. Okay, sorry. Just because I did prepare this, I feel like you need to appreciate the picture that went with the story of the desk and the plants. There you go. And then also those three takeaways that you should be able to see. I'll just leave them up there for, yeah, so yeah, the green table's coming. Just so you can have a look at that as I was talking. I knew I had fiddled with the settings at some point and I couldn't remember. So there we go. Teacher wellbeing is everyone's responsibility. We need to move from a reactive response to embedded approach, and self-care is not wellbeing, but it's an important part of it. All right. So there are 3 big questions or statements that we're going to unpack. Let's keep going. So now you should be able to see this green model. So this is really, this sits in the white paper as well, which I'll show you how to get at the end. But I think what we see is we have a few different approaches in schools. And with that comes teacher engagement and then collective outcomes. And at the moment, what we see, well, we have schools that just like, it's not even a thing. So you have 0 engagement and it's completely ignored and we're just trying to get on with it. But teachers in that school are like, they're not engaged because it doesn't exist, but that doesn't mean they're not asking for help. Then we have schools where they are more of an event-based approach type of school. So we're going to have a morning tea. We're going to get a yoga teacher in. We're going to run September. And so they're event things. And they can also be reactive when they feel that staff wellbeing is low, or when conversations with teachers in the staff room, you know, you hear ripples sometimes where people are just feeling flat and they need a bit of a pick-me-up. And so we have this event-based kind of response to wellbeing, and it tends to be the same teachers that engage in that. It tends to be the same teachers that get something out of it, and it tends to be the same teachers that drive it as well. And then we have this superficial approach. So similar to event-based, but it's almost more planned in. So it might be something that you do every other week. It could be something, you know, we could have meeting-free week in week 5 every term. It's thought about and considered, and teachers in that school are just coping. Now they're just getting on with it, and they kind of know they have things to look forward to, but they can still be event-based, but probably a bit more planned ahead rather than just reactive. So it happens, but it's certainly not anywhere near fostered or embedded. So when we move from this individual responsibility where people are organising events or a morning tea or making sure everyone knows that on Friday afternoon we can all get together in the staff room for a wind down, it's still more the individuals driving that. And it's likely that most schools would sit in that space below the line there. But once we start to shift wellbeing to more of a collective responsibility, we start to see things change. So what we can then aim to do and thrive for is this fostered and embedded approach. So a fostered approach is where this event-based and planned for thing is what you do, but it's not reactive or coping in terms of the outcome. It's part of who you are, and it's active in your conversations, and it's part of the collective dialogue you have as a school, and it's consistently shared among the staff, and it's often on the agenda and on the minds of those, and it's a welcomed conversation. So your staff in that school, the collective outcome is we're managing wellbeing, and we're also managing how it is driven in the school. Now, the ultimate, the utopia, if you like, is this embedded approach to wellbeing, and an embedded approach to wellbeing is where it almost doesn't have to be a conversation anymore, because it's just part of who you are. So the word well-being has being in it. So it's being well. I actually haven't looked up the etymology of that, but I probably should, because it'd probably be interesting. But being is state, right? So it's the state that you are. So if you have an embedded approach to well-being, then your state is that. And so it doesn't have to be reactive. It doesn't have to be planned. It does have to be planned. It doesn't have to be like a big event, because it's just part of who and how you are. So when that happens, you have beyond 100% engagement. Now, 120% engagement, why is that a thing? Because it's not just everyone engaged in it, it's everyone being it. And so there's a difference between engagement and being, because when you move to a state of being, it's about building a habit of doing something. And when you have mastered a habit, it doesn't become part of conscious thought anymore. It just becomes part of how you are. So when you build a habit, that often requires energy. But when something becomes a habit and becomes part of your state and your being, it doesn't require energy anymore. And so when you remove the energy that you are putting into having this reactive or event-based superficial response to well-being, the energy then can be put into actually living rather than responding. And when everyone is doing that, you have this really significant collective approach and response to well-being as a whole school, because it's just part of who we are and it's something that we do here. And it's not something that we react or plan to when we see teachers crying or teachers not getting up off their chair when the bell goes, or when sick days increase because we know our teachers are too exhausted. It's different. So when you look at this model, I want you to ask yourself, and you don't have to share, but where do you think you would sit as an individual or as a school, and where would you like to be? You can let me know though if that resonates with you, if you're like, yeah, I get it, or if you're like, nah, I don't get it. Also welcome. But at the moment, most schools are likely to be sitting below that line. And what we want to do with a collective approach, which involves conversation, like a real conversation, and people being vulnerable and people understanding what wellbeing is actually about, we can get above this line. I mean, there's no quick and easy solution. You know, we've got to work on it. Yeah, sit at the event-based and superficial. Yeah, you'd like to be above the line. I think we all would. Fostered and heading towards embedded, but we're lucky we're only 3 staff. But I think that's a really important thing to identify, Rose, because you're still working towards it, even though there's 3 of you. Some people would assume, well, that should be really easy because there's only 3 of you, but it's not, because it's the individual that makes the collective. And so we have to work individually and then as a whole. Struggling to cope with how different it is. That's interesting. I'd love to know more about that. Yeah. A great team, yeah. I wonder, Rose, if you've been working together for a while too, because, the research with building effective teams, it is, one of the criteria for that is that you've been together for a while. See, 3 years is enough. Is enough. They would say to go through storming or forming does take a couple of years. So 3 years is probably, I can see how you would be at that fostered moving to embedded. Yeah, you totally go ahead, Naomi, no drama. Cool, okay, let's keep going. Thanks to everyone. So here's the thing, right? You might have seen this. I actually stole it from whoever made it. This is what we think success is, but this is really what it is. This is what we think well-being is. We think it's incremental. We think it should be step by step by step. Like once I take care of my sleep, and then I take care of my diet, and then I take care of my exercise, and then I take care of my positive experiences, and then I take care of my mindfulness, and then I take care of, and we just think we should be able to layer it and go, wow. But well-being is not that. It is a crazy mess. It doesn't mean that you can't ever get to a place where you feel like you're on top of it, but then what happens is life. And this is where we have to understand that when we're looking to master our well-being, what we're really doing is not looking at how we cope when things are good, it's how do we manage things when they're off, when they're not how we want them to be, when we feel unbalanced, or when we don't feel grounded, or when we don't feel connected, or when we feel like we're stuck in a rut, or when we feel like our to-do list is like just never ending. How do we manage then? Because that is when you know that you've embedded well-being. That is when you know that you have built habits around well-being that don't require energy anymore because you just do them. Now, it doesn't mean that it's going to be a smooth ride at all, and it doesn't mean that you're not going to have up and down days, because we're all human and that life thing. But the difference is, how long do you stay down? What strategies do you have to get out? what conscious awareness do you have around where maybe you've dropped something and where you need to pick something up? Or what conscious decision are you making around, you know what, I actually have to give up an hour of my sleep at the moment because I have to get my reports done. And it's a conscious trade-off. It's not, oh my God, I'm not getting any sleep because I have to write my reports and like it's never going to end and I can't do it. There's a difference in that. Now, I don't think I'm not saying give up sleep for reports. It's as an example. It's the language and the mindset we have around that, and how conscious we are in the decisions around the components that make up wellbeing. So, from personal experience, I've really been working on myself and my wellbeing for about 4, 5, maybe 6 years. I can't remember when I first started. So I studied human behavior and coaching. I can't even remember when I started that. But the personal journey is like massive. It never ends. I'm continually unpacking and rethinking and analyzing what stuff looks like. And then, occasionally I lose it. Occasionally I lose my calm and my cool, and I don't feel connected to self anymore. Or I know that my learning isn't actively going because life is too busy. And other times I just want to eat chocolate for breakfast, which also is not great. But, I have conscious awareness around all of the components that I know make up my well-being. And so it's never smooth. And some days are just like a mess. But it's what you bring to those moments that really show that your well-being is embedded and not reactive. And so that's part of the shift that we need to uncover. So I'm just going to read some of these comments here. Feel free to write more. No ego or arrogance, we could do a whole webinar on that too. Yeah. It's a really fine line between the agenda of what you have to deliver in terms of when you're a school leader and things that you have to get done, and then managing and considering and thinking about what teaching staff have on. And there is some work to be done in that space. Having sat in both of those positions, I know the complexities of that. There's a culture around being a super teacher with glorified staying up all night to do reports that mitigates against teacher wellbeing. There is certainly that. So I have some in our Real Schools Academy intensive courses. I have self-care and wellbeing 6-week courses. And in one of those, I can't quite remember which one, but it could be in all of them, I talk about beliefs and the beliefs that we have around being a teacher, and that we have resourceful and unresourceful beliefs. I'm just trying to do this really quickly, so if you don't know what I'm talking about. So we establish beliefs which align with our values and our filtering system, and then we kind of live our life by these unconsciously. We don't even know. So either we make them up because it justifies the world that we live in, or someone teaches them and we never question them because we're never taught to question anything. So often what happens is we adopt these beliefs, like teachers who are at school first and leave last must be the best. The teachers with the prettiest classrooms are obviously really good at teaching. The teachers who complain like they're always tired and working must be doing a better job than me. And so we start to tell ourselves all of these things, which probably aren't true. They aren't true. You can't judge an effective teacher based on the amount of time they're at school. I wouldn't say that. So, it's so untrue. But we have these belief statements, and so sometimes we don't even know that we have them until we really do the hard work. And that's why our well-being can be like a mess sometimes, because we haven't, and we're not taught to really unpack, why do I feel like this? And so that's got to be part of the work, right? We've got to say, well, what do I want to believe about being a great teacher? What's true for me? For some teachers, it would be different, and that's totally okay because we're all different. So it's not going to be the same. So I don't think staff wellbeing is high on the agenda until we have a problem. And that's that reactive response where staff wellbeing isn't on the agenda until we see our staff falling apart. And that's reactive and not embedded. And that's where the discrepancies are and why we feel like wellbeing is not being taken care of, because it's this superficial event. So we've got to move past that. Cool. All right, so let's have a little bit of a chat about self-care versus well-being. So I'm going to say I wrote a newsletter, but I don't know if I've actually written one. I'll pretend I have, and if I haven't, there'll be another one coming soon about the difference between self-care versus well-being. It does exist somewhere. I have done something on this. Most of the advice, or most of what we see around well-being, is self-care. And I think that we need to be able to understand the difference of this to really unpack and know why well-being isn't addressed. So self-care really are all those lovely things, you know. It's making sure we go outdoors, it's making sure we eat the right foods, it's taking time off to get your nails done if that's your thing, it's sitting down with a cuppa and reading a book. It's those warm fuzzy things. It's the things that make you feel good and you're like, I'm just going to check out and I'm going to lay down and read my book. That's what self-care is. It's nice and it's easy and it's something that you do. So we do self-care. You know, it's the morning teas that we put on, it's the birthday celebrations, it's let's all go out for a walk one day, it's the team building stuff as well. They're all part of self-care and looking after us, and we do it. And I think when we feel like well-being is missing in schools, the first thing we run to is that idea of, well, let's do an activity around that, whatever that might be, Hot Chip Friday or go out for lunch. And again, that falls under self-care. We've got to understand that the shift between that is self-care and well-being are different. So well-being is about how you are being, which is totally different to I want to drink a cup of tea and read my book. Like, they're not the same thing. So well-being is about what is your state like. And this is the intricacies that sit in your brain, hence all of the gears and the cogs and the working thing. And so often we run out of self-care stuff to do, or it doesn't apply. The things that we offer at school don't apply to everyone because it looks different to everyone. So my partner is a triathlete and thinks that cycling for 3 hours before school or running a half marathon is great self-care. And I couldn't think of anything worse, but whatever, you know, whatever you do. And I go into my office space and I journal and I meditate and I write out my goals for the day. And he's like, I don't know why you do that. But they're the things that we do because they are part of our self-care routine. They look totally different. But in schools, we can only offer a certain amount of things. We have a certain limited number that we're limited type of events that we can offer and run just because we do. You know, you can't make people do everything. And I don't think you could say to everyone, okay, we're going to go and do a 2-hour run around the lake, because that is not self-care to everyone. But to some people it is, right? So we have these self-care events that are reactive and a response to when things are low. And they're not everyone's cup of tea, excuse the pun, they're not. And this is why some people are really like, no one cares about my well-being here, I don't know what to do. Well-being has to be different. We can't keep confusing well-being with self-care. We have to understand that our well-being, as I mentioned, is really about who you are. Who do you want to be? How are you being? Especially when things are rough, right? Like, that's when you know, when you work through those rough patches, when you work through when things feel yuck, when you push yourself through the pain points, that's when you change state and you build habit and you expand your paradigm, you shift and change beliefs, you uncover values. When you do all of that, it's like we teach kids, right? You got to go through the learning pit and come back up to know where your skill set is and what you need to tweak and improve on. When you go through that challenging moment again, you'll have another skill set or a wider range of skills to draw upon when you go there again. So we're not repeating that same old unresourceful pattern of, this is terrible and I hate it, or I don't know how to get on top of it, or, you know, life isn't great and someone else should fix it, because that's not part of what this is about. This is about working together as self and as collective. So we really have to understand that self-care is not well-being. Yeah, it's a huge part of it, but they're not the same thing. How does that sound? Because that might be new for some people. And please don't think that I'm saying if you have been doing lots of self-care in your school or for yourself or leading it that you're doing the wrong thing. You're absolutely not. self-care is really important, and it is an integral part of our, an important part of our wellbeing, and I am all for it. But I think it's time we took teacher wellbeing to the next level. That's what I'm saying. Self-care plays a part. I'll show you our model my model at the end, but we can do better. We really can. I'm just going to read some of these comments, have a drink of my tea. Yeah, Fiona, I'm going to address that point, I think, in the next slide. Honest conversations about wellbeing and embed it is, yeah, and this is the shift, right? The conversations that need to be had around wellbeing aren't about information gathering. They're about what is it to us as a school, and that's where that safe space has to exist, so you can have conversations which are potentially uncomfortable, that maybe you don't like, that maybe as someone who is driving wellbeing in your school, you don't want to hear the answers to. But that's where we have to get to. Yeah, there's a psychological safety. So Google actually was looking at, I can't remember what I was researching for, but one of the things that makes Google as a collective so effective is because their teams are built on psychological safety. It's massive. Yeah, workload does come into it. I understand that. Yeah. There is a lot around student wellbeing, and we've certainly seen a push in that space in the last few years for sure. But yeah, we can neglect that to do that with ourselves and our staff. And there needs to buy-in from all members, not a few. Yeah, you're right, Emily. So in the diagram that was green, that's where I talked about how what the buy-in from staff is depending on the approach that you have. So this is my teacher wellbeing model that I want to talk to you about. And what I really want you to see here is that each of our 5 domains are about self. So one of the things that pops up often when we talk about teacher wellbeing, and this is also in the white paper, so don't feel like you have to scramble it down. I think it's on some flyers on the website as well, is that there is a perception that sometimes leadership or our principal or our wellbeing coordinator should take responsibility for wellbeing of everyone. Now, we have to understand that these are people and that their wellbeing needs to be taken care of too, and that everyone is doing the best job they can with the information they have. And let's be really honest, staff wellbeing, teacher wellbeing is a really new concept. It is something new that everyone is trying to grapple with, and the pressures that teachers feel, school leaders feel too. So know that your leaders are thinking of you. No school leader would want any teacher to feel like that they weren't valued. But everyone is doing the best they can. And that's why our approach to wellbeing really has to shift, because we have to understand that no one is responsible for our wellbeing except us. So no one is responsible for your wellbeing except you, because you control everything that makes you be. And sometimes when we want to outsource that, we get annoyed that someone isn't taking care of our well-being and someone isn't looking after this and someone isn't doing that for us. But this is because we have a perception that self-care is well-being, and it's not. And sometimes we think that by taking something away, our well-being will get better, but it won't. It's just a band-aid. We have to look more deeply at the state of self and in terms of who we are being as a person and what is missing for us, because that is well-being. So in our teacher wellbeing approach here, that what you can see, the components in front of you, they are all about who you're being as a person in terms of these 5 things. So we know our physical self is really important, but our physical self isn't just what you eat and exercise. There's a whole lot of other components that sit behind that in terms of really how you are functioning optimally. It's how you're being in that space. Purpose is massive in terms of knowing that you're living with intention. So your purposeful self needs to be about, am I actually living with intention? Am I really having and taking conscious awareness and action in how and who I want to be? And what does that look like? Connection is, as we all know in this moment in time, huge. Connection is huge, but connection isn't just about who you are and how you connect with other people. There's also how you connect with you. So if you're a giver all the time, and most teachers are, and you naturally want to give to people all the time, when you start to feel like things are, I'll use the word out of alignment and out of center with yourself, are you connected with who you are? Do you know your beliefs and values? Do you know what's important to you? Do you know what to do to fill your own cup? Connecting to self is just as important as connecting to others, but it's not just about self-care and taking time off. It's way deeper than that. I can't unpack all of that for you right now. There is a fantastic book though that I will recommend. So if you don't listen to Brene Brown, go and do that. But she has a podcast with called Unlocking Us. She does an episode with a guy named Vivek Murthy, and he talks about the concept of loneliness and the importance of connection. And he's just written a book, which I'm trying to get my hands on, called Together. And it talks about why connection is really important. So it's recent. So it talks about COVID and the disconnection that's happening. So go and look that up. That's a really great book. It's just a side note for you, something else to do. Then of course we have our learning self. So, if you're not green and growing, then you're red and rotting. So the author's Vivek, Vivek Murthy. Learning is so important. So Tony Robbins talks about the 6 core needs that we each have as humans. So certainty, variety, this will test me, certainty, variety, connection. I used to be able to rattle them all off. But the last 2 needs are the needs of the soul, which are about growth and contribution. So, and needs of the spirit and needs of the being and the person that you are. Growth is really important. So your learning self is about, are you growing? Are you moving forward? Are you continuing to challenge yourself? We talk to our students all the time about learning and making sure that we're always, better than yesterday and just moving outside of our comfort zone, and challenge is good. But do we do that for ourselves? Because that is imperative to well-being. It really is. When you're not learning, you can fall into this easy trap of boredom and just going through life almost like Groundhog Day and not really having any conscious awareness around what it is that you're living. And then of course we have our mindful self, which is all about thoughts, beliefs and actions, which is all about the language that you use and the stories you tell yourself and the thing. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Thanks, Eve, for popping that up. And all about what's going on inside your head, actually. So in each of these are elements of self-care, but that's not the big picture. But what all of this does is feeds into your well-being. Now, in our teacher well-being partnerships that I'll share with you in a minute, or I'll share now, there are 10 modules that sit behind each of those 5. So 10 different things. So when I talk about connected self and I rattle off a few things, there's actually 10 things that sit behind that, which are, I can't remember them all. I mean, I wrote it, but I can't remember it. But there's just so much more than connecting and giving. Like, it's deeper than that. And plus I would have to do, we would be here doing another 5 webinars on each of those if I was to unpack them all for you. So that's not what this is. But what this is, this model here, is a new approach to teach wellbeing. It's about going, we need to know who we are as an individual and how that impacts the collective. And what if we had this language in our schools to say, you know what, I'm working on my learning self, but I'm just not sure where I want to go with that. Or my learning self is really taking a dive and I know I need to get back into some books. What if that was the language you started to have? Or what if you started to say things like, I just don't feel like this is giving me any purpose when I do this. I don't feel like this is important to me, or I don't feel like this is important to us as a school. Is this our purpose as a collective? What if this became the language that you use? Because that's what the consistent and the collective approach is about. It's about understanding who you are as an individual and how that comes together as a collective, which means that it is your responsibility to know that your well-being is taken care of, because no one can make you learn. No one can make you exercise and meditate and move and do all that physical stuff, and no one can make you think certain things. You control all of that. And that's the difference between well-being and self-care. And that's the difference between individual responsibility versus I'm outsourcing it to someone else and I need someone else to fix my well-being. They're not the same thing. And I think this is the conversation we need to have. And I will be honest and say, you know, there is a part of me that thinks perhaps on the other side of this screen, I have some teachers going, no, you're wrong, Amy. Someone else needs to fix this for me. But that's not what we teach our students. We teach our students to solve their own problems. We teach our students to be independent. We teach our students to embrace discomfort so that they can move beyond their comfort zone and grow. And somewhere along our journey into adults, when it gets hard and we don't know what to do, we want someone else to fix it, because we become too busy and preoccupied with just going about life. And we have to all pause and we have to stop and we have to go, you know what? I'm responsible for me. Just like we say to our students, hands off, feet off, you're responsible for yourself. We're responsible for us. And then once we shift this and we work on ourselves, we can have collective and wholehearted and vulnerable and safe and powerful conversations together as staff about what does wellbeing really look like. Because we're all using a shared language and we all understand and we all know that at times it's a little bit hard. It doesn't always feel good. But there are elements of self-care we can use to lift ourselves up. And there are certainly elements in there that we can celebrate and talk about and move through at our own pace, but also together. So I'm going to stop talking because I talk a lot. I'm really excited about this. I think that the more that we look at this and engage and unpack and talk about, the more that we can see a shift in individuals and schools. What do you think? I imagine everyone, this is brand new, right? Because you're the first people I'm really showing this to in a public forum, unless you've read my white paper or seen it on our flyer. But what do you think? You're loving it. Good. I mean, if you all wrote back, no, it's terrible, just tell me what to do, I'd have a little bit of work to do, wouldn't I? But this is a new approach. This is a new approach. It really is. And I understand it's a stretch, and maybe it's not what you came here for. You know, maybe you were like, I hope she just gives me a list of stuff. If you want a list of stuff, just Google it. Serious. You can Google self-care. You'll get 52 checklists. And it's not the norm. It's not the norm, Rachel. It's not. Yeah, it's not the norm. It's not what we're taught. Like I said, if you want to know how to improve your self-care, just Google that. Yeah, it's not a quick fix. It's not a quick fix at all, Svetlana. It's an, you know what? This wellbeing journey is messy. It is not a smooth ride. It's okay to have days where you are like, I cannot adult today. It's totally okay. It's okay to have days where you're like, no, I just got nothing. Like I have nothing today. Because we're human, right? We're people. I always say you're a person first and a teacher second. You're a person. Let yourself be a person. It's not about perfection. There is no perfection. I was listening to something this morning and it was unpacking the concept of that if you aim for perfection, you actually have no standards. So, I mean, that's a little bit of a kick, isn't it? You always say, why am I adulting today? I know I should get that on a t-shirt for us. I'm just going to read through some of these. So yeah, I'm glad that is hitting the mark with you. I did when I said, how did you go with that? There was a part of me that's like, geez, if they all say they hate it, I'm in trouble. Yeah, it's a shift from, yeah. I mean, you wouldn't outsource your finances to someone without having any idea about what's going on, would you? You wouldn't do it. So why are we outsourcing our well-being? Why are we doing that? I went too far. I'm trying to scroll through the comments and I scroll through the slides. It's interesting to think about the difference between self-care and well-being. Yeah, it is. It is a total paradigm shift. And you know what? When you go through paradigm shifts, if you know anything about that, and I understand it is a bit spiritual, but it's what happens when you stretch and grow beyond what you know reality to be through filtering systems, which is a whole different thing. It's ugly and messy. Like, it's hard. It's really hard. We have to acknowledge that this is not an easy journey. Staff need to hear things like it's okay to have a bad day. Yeah, and it is about bouncing back, but it's also about going, what have I learned? What have I learned about the situation? What have I learned about myself? What didn't I do that was like cool? What did I like really drop the ball on? What do I learn about my beliefs here that I need to shift? Or why do I not feel fulfilled in this? What's missing? Yeah, great. Can you find further information? You absolutely can, Beck, and I will get to that, because what's the time? Nearly 8 o'clock. We want to go watch Netflix, don't we? Okay, so here we go. Here's the good stuff. Don't want to look into their own wellbeing response. Yeah. That's a big conversation, Eva, around staff wanting to not acknowledge it's their own responsibility, and we can talk more about that later if you want to flick me an email, but it's a hard thing to break. So here we go. Let's see if I can do this quickly for you. This is my white paper. If you have not had access to it already, it is free, which is the best thing, right? And it is on our website. So if you go to realschools.com.au, find the partnerships panel at the top, drop down, you'll see teacher wellbeing partnerships, head there. You can download this for free. I think it's like 4 or 5 pages or something. The value model in here, which was green on our slide, but it's blue, is here. And the other one that we just talked about is there as well. Now this is a great paper, I know, because I wrote it. It took me ages too, but it's almost like this conversation I've had with you, but it won't solve all your problems. There's no answers in here. It's simply research on the model and the difference between self-care and wellbeing and where we need to head. So read it, absolutely, share it with people, use it to have discussions. It's really important and really powerful, but it won't give you any answers. It won't solve the problem, you know, because you cannot do this in a workbook that you can download for free, unfortunately. So I have put together teacher wellbeing partnerships. Now, I think this is the first thing like this out there. And I would even go as far as saying, I don't think you're going to find a model like mine that exists anywhere else. So if you are thinking that this is something that you want to explore, there is my Calendly link there and in a bit.ly. And if you are not comfortable with that, pop down in our chat box there to everyone that you would like to have a chat, or put the word Calendly, and I can make that happen for you as well. We can arrange a time. So our teacher wellbeing partnerships, probably should tell you what they are literally a partnership, as the title suggests. And they are 12 months long. So for $275, yeah, lovely, Larissa. For $275, you can flick me an email straight up, amy@realschools.com.au, and just put chat in the subject and I'll get back to you. $275 for a whole year, and you get to hang out with me, and $1,950 for a school license, whether you have 10 or 100 people, it doesn't matter. And over that 52 weeks, we're going to together look at those 10 things that sit behind each of those 5 domains. So it's a weekly email that you get with a bit of text and a quick video. And then roughly every 5 to 6 weeks, I'll be flicking you an ebook or a podcast, or we're all going to get together and have a chat like this too. So there's definitely opportunities to explore that and really learn more about that model and apply it in a partnership way, because, you know, it's not a quick fix. So there's the Calendly link, or just flick me an email, put chat in the box if you can't figure either of those 2 things out, but I'm sure you will know how to use your email. So that's one thing that we have on offer around that. Before we wrap up, does anyone have any questions? Larissa, I've got you on my list. Fabulous. Okay. So I think I had someone who's going to check. Yeah, fabulous, Eva. Yeah, the recording will be available. We'll send it out to you for sure. You'll get the recording. I think like Google on my phone thought I was asking for a chat. I'm not. So there's my email right down the bottom here. If you would like to get in touch with me, or head to the website, you'll find all the stuff here too. Yeah, thank you so much for jumping in. I know that this was a different conversation. I know that this is not the normal wellbeing type of thing that you have, but we'll talk to the boss. Yeah, great. this is why we're struggling, isn't it? Because we just, you know, it's that definition of insanity. We keep doing the same thing over and over again and wondering why we're not getting anything any different. It's because we've got to change this. We've got to do something different. And this is it. So we can't continue just with self-care stuff. We can't continue with reactive stuff. We can't continue with morning teas. Don't get rid of them. Everyone loves a morning tea, but they're not the answer to well-being. So we've got to keep having these conversations. We've got to understand that our approach at the moment, being reactive, is not embedded, and we have to shift that. So I'm going to leave you with that. Yeah, it is quite exciting. Thank you, Fiona. I really appreciate that. I'm going to leave you with that. Please make sure you download the white paper or flick me an email. We can have a chat, whatever. Yeah, I don't tend to sugarcoat things. It's true. And I'm glad you love that. Gosh, we're not going to get change with waffle. That would be like trying to teach students in your classroom, but never actually giving direct instruction. For what purpose? Yeah, 5 domains. Yeah, thanks, Isabella. Really appreciate that. If you have to jump off, best hour of PD in a long time. Awesome. Thanks, Rose. I love hearing that. Thank you so much to, as I mentioned before, yeah, this is my first like live audience in sharing this, so I'm really glad to see that people loved it. Got me on Facebook. Yeah, I do like videos and stuff on there as well. Yeah, so you can grab stuff. Make sure you're following Real Schools and Real Schools Academy. So I am the Director of Teacher Education at Real Schools Academy. So that's where most of this work is. Would you have a limit to how many can join your courses? No, we don't. It's unlimited. I'm based in Canberra myself. That's where I live. So if that's anywhere near you, Rachel, we can certainly catch up. Yeah. Look, you are totally forgiven if you're focused on self-care, because that's what we know, right? That's why this conversation is important, because we're not taught anything different. We're not taught that well-being is actually about state, and it's more about how to be rather than what to do. And that's okay. You know, we consume knowledge as information, and then when we transfer it, it becomes knowledge. But what we really have to work through and work towards is that embedded state where what we've learned is no longer an effort, and it's part of how we are and who we're being, hence well-being. All right, guys, if there's no more questions or comments, I'm going to leave you there. Feel free to jump off when you're ready. And if there's anything else that you have questions or you want to know about, please email, get in touch. All our details are on the website as well, so you can easily do that. If there's anything else you think you might need as a school around wellbeing, just ask. Just ask. Yeah, Emily, maybe flick me an email about that. We can have a different conversation if you like. Yeah, it's tricky. Yeah, cool. All right, I think our comments have died down, so I'm going to leave you. Have a wonderful Thursday evening. Make sure you go and look after yourself. Let those things ponder in your mind, as new learning always does. And I look forward to hearing from you and seeing you somewhere else very soon. Have a great evening, everyone. Bye.